Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Merry Christmas to everybody. Happy holidays for those who don't celebrate Christmas. This is a festive time of the year, and guess what? Here's a video for you guys, a present from me to you, a tier list for Premium. This is the landscape of what Premium will be like come Worlds. So for those of you guys who are playing Premium like myself at Worlds, this is a must-watch video. This is pretty much gonna tell you everything that you need to know about the Premium format, just kind of how everything kind of sits at the moment, and essentially what decks to look out for at Worlds. If you guys need any coaching for the new year, my Metafy link is in the bottom right hand corner and in the description. Feel free to book a session and we can get started for your Springfest season. If you guys haven't already, click that subscribe button for all notifications on this channel for when I release all my new videos. So going through a lot of the clans here, the big change that we got over the last couple of weeks is Mutol ban. So Mutol ban means no more loops. So we don't need to worry about loops anymore, which is great, right? So I'm just gonna rank these based on, I guess, performance and I guess playability, but as well as kind of the trends, right? One of the things I said in the earlier parts of the season is that Gridora was a deck to start off the season and end the season, and just kind of give you guys a picture of what I expect or what I suspect to see at Worlds. So the first, I guess, few decks that we'll go through, I guess not as predominant. So Tachikaze, for example. This is a clan where people need to be enthusiasts of the clan to kind of build the deck, test the deck, and kind of know the ins and outs of the deck. Otherwise, like the deck itself is, you know, a little bit, how should I say, hard to maneuver, and you kind of need to know the ins and outs of everything, right? So Tachikaze, I don't actually expect to see a lot, and we haven't seen a lot at all, if any, during the BCS season. So we'll put it at C. Anything from B and above, I would definitely consider bringing to Worlds, and yeah, that's that. Aquaforce is another one. Aquaforce, I'll put it in B. This deck is, how should I say, it was a deck that was really good in the ride down meta and just kind of put onto the wayside because everything else got like buffed. The difference between S, A, and B are actually very minimal. So the gap in between each tier is very small. There are significant things in decks that are in S that are better than A, and then A better than B. So Aquaforce, I think, is a deck that, you know, if you are a really good Aquaforce player, like we're at, he would, you know, appreciate that Aquaforce is a deck to be considered for Worlds. So B, I know, you know, above the benchmark, and that is the tier that I'll put Aquaforce in. Something like Angel Feather, Angel Gize is like still a deck, but I feel that the deck lacks a lot. If you know how to play against Gize, like the deck is just not that great. So I'll put it in C. It arguably could be low B, but I don't suspect Angel Gize to be doing super well, especially with a lot of other things like Erads and a lot of like super aggro decks. Angel Gize actually might just fall over and die. Spike Brothers. So I think Spike Brothers is actually pretty good. Whether I put it like high B, low A, I think low A is giving the respect that it deserves. I think Spike Brothers is still very strong. Galley is still a very strong stride. It still has a really good grade 2 game. And if people just ride up, sometimes they're not prepared and get absolutely blasted by Galley, and you literally can't do anything about that. So that's Spike Brothers. Something like Dimension Police. I think Dimension Police is a very strong deck. Sometimes it can just win games, you know, One Punch Man, and your opponent literally can't do anything. You hit the Elder Breath OT and your opponent can't do anything either. So I think DP is a deck that people will bring, regardless of how, you know, bad the meta is. Sometimes you just don't care, your opponent doesn't care, and guess what? Just punch your way through, and that's pretty much your whole tournament, right? Link Joker. So I think Link Joker is actually a pretty good deck, and this is more a meta call more than anything. There are a lot of decks in the meta that beat Link Joker. For example, Highlander is a very easy deck to kind of maneuver to beat Link Joker. Another one would be Neo Nectar as well. Link Joker just has a really hard time because you're locking tokens, and what the heck are you going to do if you lock tokens, right? So yeah, Link Joker is one of the decks to kind of look out for because it has a really good matchup into Erads. And you know, if you have a good matchup into the best deck in the format, then you know it might be considered a deck to bring. Something like Dark Regulars has actually dropped off a lot, but it's still a very strong deck. So I'll put Dark Regulars in A. There are still going to be people out there playing NLK variants. There is a Shahara Castile variant as well. But I think that is a little bit fragile in comparison to NLK. But then again, if NLK is versing against something like Erads, then it has a really hard time. Now, looking at this is Genesis, and Genesis hasn't actually changed a lot, and it doesn't need to, right? It's a very formidable deck. Regale is still a very strong deck. We've seen other variants as well. Fenrir come first place. And there's a lot of things going for Genesis, and I think Genesis is in a place where, you know, it's very good, right? It doesn't need super broken support to make it good. It just needs like little touches here and there, and the deck is, you know, still full functioning as it was in the previous season. Something like Great Nature. This is Great Nature, right? Yeah, because the other one's Menkoi. Great Nature. So Great Nature, I versed a pretty cool Great Nature deck in Indonesia, which ran Big Belly and a bunch of like, you know, other techie cards. And I think Great Nature is actually pretty alright. Obviously, it's not as good as something like, I don't know, Aqua Force maybe, or something that is a bit more aggressive. So maybe like I put it high C, low B. But I guess the representation for GN isn't that high, so maybe we'll put it in C. So I think the deck, it needs a little bit more to push it over into the next tier up, and potentially even into tier A. It needs a lot of early game. It needs a way to be able to farm up resources and not get absolutely demolished by every other deck in the format. Royals, so that is Jewel Knights. I think Jewel Knights is formidable. You know, sometimes you can ride into, you know, Alt Mile, generate a bunch of force, go into your Salome and absolutely destroy people with Crystal Luster, and sometimes that might just win you the game. So that is Royals there. This is Shadows. So Shadows has RFD, and I think RFD is an alright deck. It's pretty strong. We've seen results for it. I think in Vietnam we saw one in Melbourne as well. So I think RFD is pretty strong. Does die to disruption decks, so like Narukami. So yeah, RFD kind of goes there. And talking about disruption decks, let's talk about Narukami, one of the best decks in the format at the moment, and it hasn't changed with the choice restriction between Sweep Command and Demolition Dragon. It really didn't do too much. It gave a slap on the wrist to a deck that was consistently performing, and you know, now Erad players or Narukami players in general kind of have to choose one side of the coin or the other, right? So to use Sweep or to use Demolition, and I think a lot of people are still on the Sweep train. There has been decks out there that has played Pure Vanquisher with Demolition Dragon. So yeah, lots of variants to kind of go there. And I think Narukami is probably going to be one of the highest represented decks at Worlds this year. And yeah, it just does what it does. It doesn't really care. And a lot of decks just can't keep up with just how much advantage Narukami generates. Now GC, I think GC is in an area where it's pretty good, given that everything else is like a tier down, I think. Crest Jet is still really good. There are variants like Steam Maiden that Dave Vac has been playing, and it's seeing results, but obviously seeing results only from one person, or very minimal people. So I think GC is in a niche at the moment, but I think in the hand of the right player, it can actually be very, very strong. But yeah, Dave Vac, current reigning world champion, so lots of respect on that name too. OTT, so I think OTT is actually pretty strong. Arguably could be low A, but I'll put it high B. So the deck just draws in the early game, you Amena Murakumo to get the Amaterasu, stack a bunch of crits, and your numbers are actually pretty big, and your opponent can't deal with it. Super annoying deck. And you know, sometimes you just go through your deck and then get to Popo and then just automatically win, and your opponent doesn't have a Sanctitude. So that is one really good thing going for OTT, but I think the nature of the deck, it's too slow for what is, I guess, really quick in this meta. Something like Highlander, Eradicators. Yeah, OTT is a little bit slow. So I guess talking about Highlander, I think Highlander is one of the best decks in the format at the moment. It is only really the Bermuda variant. There are other variants like Riviere, but I think Riviere just drops 1 or 2 tiers down. But we're talking about the best deck here. The best deck is Highlander, and I think this is, you know, one of the best decks in the format. There are things that you put into Highlander to ensure that you check the Narukami matchup, but yeah, like there's really nothing else much more to kind of say. Highlander has been a deck you know, that is really strong in the metagame. Something else that has been really strong as of recent is Neonectar. So I think Neonectar is very strong, playing the Inverno as well as the what's it called? The grade 2, the one that counterblast 1, soulblast 1, generate a token and draw 1. Elmar? Or something like that. Yeah, the grade 2. You generate a ridiculous amount of hand, and you don't use CB on anything. You have a G-Guard that refunds you a CB for 30k shield. You recycle your Horticulture Elf. You have a lot of consistency. You have early game, you have pretty much everything. You have Asha to ride up to get double force markers. It's a very strong deck, and to be honest, big shout out to the French guys, Yoann and Louis, for pretty much crafting this deck. I think this deck has been overshadowed for so long, and finally someone has taken the initiative to bring Neonectar back to where it was. So I think Neonectar is a very strong deck going into Worlds. Nova Grappler. So I'm a little bit biased. So Nova Grappler is odd. It's in an odd place, but Stephen Lee won with Nova Grappler and went 11-0. So, or 12-0, which is pretty bizarre. So I think I'll put Nova Grappler high B, potentially low A. I think in that particular regard, it might just be the player, but I think Nova Grappler in a nutshell, there's a lot going for it. There's a little bit more early game now that you can ride up to Victor, generate your 2 XLs. You still have the problem of versing Erads, but I think there are mechanisms in Victor that stop Erads, and I think Victor actually has a really good matchup into Highlanders as well. So maybe I'll put it in low A. I'll put some respect on Nova Grappler, because Highlander doesn't have to Q-tier anymore, so you can't automatically find your Honolly, and sometimes, you know, you just outpace your opponent, you outnumber them, and multi-attack the living crap out of your opponent, and they literally can't do anything, right? So I think Nova Grappler, pretty interesting clan at the moment for Premium, and I think sitting in A is a respectable position for Nova Grappler at the moment. This is Nubatama? Oh no, this is Nubatama. So Nubatama, I think, is a very strong deck, and I think it's like high A or maybe mid A, somewhere here. Just know that like the arrangements of these clans aren't really, it doesn't really matter. It's just in the same line, right? Nubatama, I think, is a very strong deck. It has an insane TR, which makes you discard no matter what. And unless you're Bermuda Triangle, where you can like bounce your whole hand, that's like the only thing going for it. But even then, like, Bermuda Triangle really struggles against this deck, because what it does is that it pretty much rips your hand apart, and it hits for pretty filthy numbers, and it resets your Vanguard power to 11, which is actually so annoying, right? You hit no T, well, too bad. You go back to 11 and deal with it, right? So I think Nubatama is actually very strong, brinking the S tier, I think. But I think if it's piloted by the correct people, I think it will do a lot of damage. Pale Moon. So this is coming from me, someone who has played Pale Moon for the season. Yes, I did win the Manila Regionals, but I feel that the deck isn't as great as people think it is. So the reason why I say that is because I built Harry to play into a field of Eradicators, but now that a lot of the meta has changed, I have to compete against Highlander and Neonectar, which are actually two really hard matchups for Pale Moon, just because of the nature of Pale Moon in itself and just how fragile it is, right? So I think Pale Moon, as much as, you know, it's great, I think it's just the benchmark, and I think the benchmark is as much as it can get. But the one good thing about Pale Moon is that if you give it first stride, it's over. Like, you generate so much advantage, and you pretty much generate a hand size worthy of 2 turns of guarding in 1 turn, which is ridiculous, right? You have access to Denial Griffin, you have access to pretty much everything in your soul. The only deck that would really kill you is Ghidorah, right? Otherwise, if you give it first stride and you get to farm up, like, the deck is absolutely crazy. The one problem with Pale Moon though is that it doesn't actually have a finisher, unless you're playing something like Nightmare Doll. Then it has a finisher in Dust, but Harry in itself doesn't actually have a really good finisher. So I guess that's one thing that is missing out for Pale Moon at the moment. So maybe I'll give it a bit more respect. I'll put it in high B, low A, just where it is. I think that is a good place for it to be. Grand Blue, everyone's favorite. I still think is a very strong deck. If Mega Colony never existed, this deck would probably be the best deck in the format. It has access to pretty much everything. It has multiple G guards, multiple PGs, and yeah, the deck is pretty nuts. Has Denial Griffin plays. It's the most flexible deck in the format, and I think Grand Blue is ridiculous. So this will be Kagero, right? This looks like Kagero. Kagero has Lawkeeper and Overlord. I think it's just okay. I don't know. The deck is just... There's a lot of weaknesses to the deck. It's very fragile, very glass cannon-y. There is one that uses... what's that? Quad Drive Stride? The one that... the one from the recent premium collection. It's like... nuke something and then like gains quad drive or whatever. If you hit an OT on that, like, you just win, right? There has been some Eugene shenanigans, but I don't think the deck is good enough for me to warrant higher than C, unfortunately. If maybe, you know, someone proves me wrong, then cool, you know, then I'll put it in from C to B and potentially A, you know, if people start changing the landscape of things, and, you know, a lot of people play Kagero. So I guess Yasue is the next one. Yasue is missing a lot. It needs a way to, I guess, play the early game towards Shiryuki, and then it gets, you know, a little bit more amped up. But otherwise, you know, Shiryuki used to be good because the meta was slow, but now that the meta is a bit quicker, I think it's, yeah, it's just there. I think going into Worlds, you probably don't need to worry too much about Shiryuki unless, you know, someone amazing, you know, brings it. But yeah, Shiryuki, I think high C, low B. I guess it really depends on the meta landscape and I guess the tournament that you're going into. This is Golds. What does Golds have? Percival? Ultima? Gurglet? I think it's alright. I think there has been Gurgit decks out there that have topped. Gurgit in itself, I think Gurgit is really strong because now you have the History Collection Stride to create 2 XLs. You ride into V Gurgit and then you have access to Percival as well. So now you're, you know, generating like 4, 5 XL markers. And then that's like plus 25k on all your multi-attacks. You also have access to Ultima as well, which is still one of the best win cons in the game. So I think it's pretty strong, but I wouldn't put it in A just because of how many people actually use it, and there are actual counters to it as well. Now, the big topic of Ghidorah. Where does Ghidorah go? And I think it actually goes like here, right? This is controversial, but I'll give you my reasonings for why Ghidorah goes in B, okay? The deck itself counters the best decks in the format, given that it beats everything else as well, right? Then Ghidorah becomes the best deck in the format. But the reality is that it doesn't, right? If you look at the top, the 2 out of the 3 decks at the top, right? You're versing Urads and you're versing Highlander, right? There is no way you are winning that matchup just because they're calling from hand, right? It has access to multiple ways to get new grade 3s. You stun their board, but with what board, right? Bermuda doesn't care, right? Narukami as well. Zuitan's going to Soul. Sure, you stun your Esperadia, but you can just Soul Blast 1 for Esperadia and restand it again. Cool. But yeah, like, you're not beating these 2 decks, right? These 2 decks just out aggro you. If you're versing Highlander, they'll ride up, ride down, and you literally can't do anything, right? You just don't generate enough advantage, unfortunately, and that's just the reality against these 2 decks. Sure, you might beat Neonectar in the later game, but that is actually not an auto loss. Neonectar can play a really aggressive early game, and you might just fall over, you ride up, and then you give 1 stride to Neonectar into Katrina, and you just die, right? One other thing that you could do is, like, you can play a little longer game with Megaloma, and yeah, your opponent just literally can't do anything after that, right? Sure, you might beat something like Granblue or maybe Link Joker. Nah, Link Joker, you still lose, right? You just lock your 2 front row and you literally can't do anything. Nubatama would absolutely wreck you. Sure, you beat Spike Brothers. You will beat Darker Raids as well. Minerva doesn't care about you. Minerva will just stomp all over you. Maybe you'll beat Steam Maiden, but Steam Maiden still has a really good early game package. And Nova Grappler just sits on you, right? So just there, right? You're only beating 3 decks. Like, how in the world are you going into a Worlds tournament playing Mega Colony when S tier and A tier decks, where 80 or 90% of the decks are beating you? Like, it's just not on, right? Sure, there will be like the 1 or 2 or maybe 3 people playing Granblue, but the reality is, in a 70-man tournament, you are not going to be matched up into Granblue all the time, right? And that's just that. Unfortunately, Ghidorah, as much as people say it's great, the stride is absolutely busted though. Grade 4 Ghidorah actually should be limited to 1, just because of how unfun the experience is to a lot of decks. The deck in its entirety is just not great, right? I would play Neonectar, Granblue, Bermuda, Spike Brothers, Darker Eggs. I would play all these decks above Ghidorah any day of the week, right? And that's just that. Unfortunately, sorry, Mega Colony fans, that's just how it is. And I think if you guys, you know, feel indifferent, let me know down in the comments below, like, why Ghidorah should be put higher. But my reasonings are very valid, right? You've seen it in the middle of the season for BCS. No one ran it because everyone ran Rads, and you literally get stomped on by any deck that isn't a superior core deck. So yeah, that is pretty much the tier list for Premium, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, pop a like, comment down below what you guys think of the format at the moment. What are you guys playing? What are you guys looking forward to at Worlds? And you know, the World stream will be on, so I think Fuzzy and TIE Fighter will be commentating that one, so make sure to tune in and support them. If you guys haven't already, click that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in the next video.